Thank you very much for having me. So, I don't know if anybody knows what I'm here to talk about today, but I'm here to talk to you about hair health and really just to bust some myths about aging and hair, because, well, obviously, all being women here, apart from Connor, we all care about our hair, I think, as women. And even if you don't have a problem with hair loss, then we all want to have like better health for your hair, better sort of lustrous hair as much as possible. So a lot of my clients actually, even maybe before they come to see me or the first consultation, will say, oh, it's just my age, there's something you can do. And they're kind of very like despondent even to begin with. Well, I don't think you'll be able to help me. So I really just want to bust that myth that no, age isn't the reason for anything. But obviously there is an aging process. So I just want to explain a little bit about your hair and your health. And as I go along, if anybody needs me to clarify on any points, and I'm trying to make it as informal as possible, so you can ask me as I go along. But I'm actually a trichologist. I don't know if people have, if you're aware of that. So can you put your hands up? Who's ever heard of a trichologist? Oh my God, that's quite a lot. Wow, okay. You know, if I asked you a few years ago, I don't think it would be as many. Because when I used to meet people and like at social occasions, and I introduced myself just socially, and people would say, oh, what do you do? And I say, oh, I'm a trichologist. And everybody used to think I said a psychologist. Nobody had ever heard of trichologist. So I'd always have to explain what that is. But not every hand went up. So for those people that don't know. So a trichologist is a professional that specialises in hair health, hair and scalp health. So it's very much different from what a hairdresser does when they're looking at your hairstyling. This is very much from the health perspective of what's going on. So I help people with hair loss and with scalp problems. So I do consultations for that. And I've been doing this for 30 years now. And I had a background as a nurse, a specialist in women's health originally, and then also worked as a very senior nurse as a nurse practitioner in GP surgery and as a nurse advisor for NHS Direct. I also have a background as studied a lot of nutrition. So put out some of the products here. So these are my range of products that I actually created. So I've got shampoos, conditioners, supplements and things. So we can talk about those later if anyone needs to, or if it's relevant. But yeah, so to talk about your hair and to understand how it's really affected by what's going on inside your body, I just want to explain. So on the outside, we have the epidermis of your skin, and then underneath the epidermis, you have the dermis. So inside the dermis is where you have all the structures of, like, you have your hair follicles and your sweat glands and your sebum glands, so where you produce the oil. So that's why it's quite deep inside, and that's why your hair is actually very responsive to what's going on inside your body. So a lot of people think that their hair is actually dead, and it's not. It's living. It's very much living, and it's very much dependent on what's going on internally, what you can see outside. So, and that's why trichologists know we cover skin as well, because your scalp health is also very, very important with what's going on with what we can see. You have to make sure that your scalp is in good condition. So, and that is very important because, well, I may get back to that later, about the caring of your scalp. But a lot of people are quite interested in me explaining how the hair cycle works. So you have three main cycles of your hair. One is the anagen cycle, and that is the hair growing cycle. And that approximately lasts for about 1,000 days. It's around about 3 to 4 years. And then you have a catagen phase, which is a little bit of an in-between phase, which lasts for about 10 days. And then the other major phase is the telogen phase, which is the shedding phase. The shedding phase lasts for 100 days, give or take the odd day. So it's very important when you're kind of figuring out what's going on with your hair to kind of know about this cycle, because timing is very important. So when I'm seeing people for my consultations, I always check dates and things with them, because it's really important, because what's going on in your hair right now is a reflection of your life 100 days ago, if you think about the telogen cycle. So that's a very important little point there. And of course, as you get older, there's a few things that start happening. And one is that the anagen phase, the growing phase, gets a bit shorter. So the hairs don't grow as long before they then start shedding. The other thing that happens is the follicles shrink a little bit, so it makes the hairs finer. And then because of hormonal changes, you have less production of your sebum, so that's the oil production, and that can cause your hair to be more dry and a bit frizzy. And of course the hair gets a bit grayer, and then that, because of the melanin production, is much lesser, and the melanin changes can make the hair a bit coarser, actually. So we talked about it being finer, but can also get a bit coarser and a bit more wiry because of less pigmentation coming out. Those are some of the things that happen, but obviously the big part, I don't think, as I said, I really have to explain the aging process a little bit, but most of this is because of, rather than age, is really down to the menopause and to the hormones that happens. So it's mostly because of the estrogen declining that's going on. So that causes you to have a weaker and finer hair. Some people, if you have a genetic predisposition, will get this form of female pattern hair loss, where you get some thinning on the top or at the crown, or maybe a little bit at the temples here. And you have to have the genetic predisposition. So if you have like some male pattern hair loss in the family, for instance, and so if your granddad was a little bit bald, because it like particularly on the maternal side seems to be a bit stronger, and then you may inherit the genes. And it really only manifests itself when you get into the menopausal stage, because then you have less estrogen and you have a greater balance of a greater imbalance, I should say, of testosterone. So that causes a miniaturization of your follicles. So the testosterone gets converted into dihydrotestosterone, so that's DHT, and that's what causes the miniaturization. So I don't know, some people have heard of DHT, which is why I thought I'd mention it in case you're like, oh, she's not mentioned it. So you can get this natural thinning from the menopause and beyond. And then some people go on HRT, and some HRTs are really good for your hair, but a lot of them are going to be very synthetic. Most of them are synthetic and they're not good. So the estrogen components of the HRTs are usually fine. It's the progesterone component that you need to watch out for. So I don't know if anyone's contemplating HRT or on it, but if you are looking for HRT, then getting a bioidentical one is better. So that would be Eutrogestion, which is the one that I would recommend, which is bioidentical. And I wouldn't recommend going on HRT just for your hair, but if you had any other medical reasons or like some other side effects that you wanted to go on it for, then that would be the one to ask for. So in effect, as hormonal changes can influence your hair, but you can balance your nutrients and maximize your hair scalp health. So my number one tip for your hair care is actually washing your hair more often. So a lot of people get really shocked when I say that, because you hear everywhere that you should minimize how much you wash your hair. But that is actually my number one tip. If you just wash your hair more often, that solves a lot of problems. Now, a lot of problems that people will get with their hair is because of scalp issues, and especially when you get a bit older, then your scalp can get drier, and people will think they don't need to wash the hair as often because it's not greasy like it was when you were younger. But in actual fact, it's very important because you still get a build-up of dead skin cells, you get pollutions, and you have So there's toxins in the air. There's also build up from products that you might be using. So it's really important to wash that off. Have lovely clear follicles. That really enables your hairs to grow properly by having a good wash. So I would say a minimum of every other day is what I recommend for hair washing. If you want to wash your hair every day, then that's great. But I say a minimum of every other day. And obviously the caveat to that is don't do heat styling. So that is where it gets very damaging if you're doing a lot of heat styling, and that can really weaken your hair and cause breakage and make it dry. Also, you need to use good quality shampoos and conditioners. So I have like my own range of shampoos, which are all organic, award-winning shampoos, and conditioners as well. So making sure you're getting really good quality ones is important there. That would be my only caveat to washing your hair more often. But yes, if you have a scalp problem, then just do that one thing and that will make a huge difference to you. Yeah, and obviously my shampoos are organic, but if you're not getting organic shampoos, then at least try to avoid like the SLS, the silicones and the sulfates, because they're very, very harsh and make your scalp even drier, and that can cause a big problem. So your scalp is kind of a little bit like soil, so you really need to look after. So if you're a gardener, you really need to like make sure you're fertilizing your garden and looking after it, and then your hair will actually grow. I'm a bit obsessed with growing with my lawn, so I have patches in my lawn. I'm a little bit obsessed with making sure that I'm regrowing my patches, and for me it's like regrowing alopecia. So it's like, yeah, you have to water it, you've got to put the nutrients in, and then you have to be patient as well, unfortunately, because it's a very slow process with your hair. It's much slower than with grass. So if you remember my cycle that I talked about, so it'd be a minimum of sort of 4 months before you start to notice a difference with regrowth. I usually tell people 6 months, give it 6 months. But yeah, you can notice improvements quicker sometimes, but usually that's how long it takes. When it comes to your skin has a different cycles. Your skin has a life cycle of 28 days, that's about a month. So when you're clearing up your skin, and that's how long you usually allow for that. When it comes to your nails, because a lot of supplements are good for your nails too, so your nails would usually get better in the cycle is 7 days. So it's about a week for your nails, a month for your hair, a month for your skin, and then 4 months for your hair. So that's the life cycle there. So things that you really need to do to feed your hair will obviously be nutrients, making sure you're eating the right food. And a lot of people are giving up red meat, and it's another myth that I'd like to bust, is giving up red meat. It's actually quite vilified, but I would recommend it as a very nutrient-dense food. If possible, go for organic and grass-fed, but if you can't, then just red meat will be fine. It's going to be better than anything else, so better than poultry. Animal products generally, so animal-based products, because they're going to be very high in protein, very high in nutrients. So eggs in particular, that's my other superfood. So red meat and eggs are my 2 best foods. If you're looking at fish, then things like sardines are really good, because you're going to get all the bones and everything in the sardines. So little small oily fish are really good. And the key nutrients, obviously my supplements, my M&Os are my main supplement. This is my foundation for everything. So in here, I have got 37 different nutrients. So it's making sure you're getting everything you need for your hair and for your health. But my key nutrients that really you need high doses of, and that tend to get lower as you get older as well, are your vitamin D. So vitamin D is very essential for hair follicle growth. So there's vitamin D receptor sites in the hair follicles. So it's really, really important for your hair regrowth. It's getting your vitamin D levels optimal. And it's also good for your general health and wellness to also get your vitamin D levels up. Now, quite often doctors, or you will hear, is that you only need like 1,000 international units for vitamin D. But I would generally recommend an absolute minimum of 4,000 international units a day. And as you get older, you're less able to assimilate vitamin D from the sun. And also, if people are cutting down on red meat, again, that's another thing I notice when I do people's blood tests, because I always do everyone's blood tests when I see them. I find that vegetarians and vegans always have much, much lower levels of vitamin D. So even though you can't really get much vitamin D from food, I have found that you will get a fair amount from eggs and from meat. The other ones that are really important are for your hair regrowth are iron. So a lot of ladies have very low levels of iron. When you're pre-menopause, or if you're having periods every month, then you're more likely to be low in iron. And as you get to the menopause, you're less likely to be low, unless you are like vegetarian, vegan, or just cutting down on red meat. So generally I say eat red meat at least 3 times a week. So that's different. That's very different from what people get told. So I appreciate that, because your doctors often say, "Oh, you've got high cholesterol. You need to cut down on your red meat intake." But I completely disagree with that. And then the other thing is B vitamins. So B12 in particular is one that as you get older, tends to get a bit lower than some people. So because it's something that you have to process in your tummy, and people are often taking lots of other medications that can kind of interfere with how the B12 is assimilated in the body. So a lot of people are taking PPIs, like antacid indigestion tablets, and that can really hinder your absorption of nutrients, in particular the B vitamins, and a lot of other medications that can really affect your hair would be ones for blood pressure and statins and antidepressants. So those ones are all really, really big factors. So if you're on any of those, I recommend asking your doctor if you like to go on the lowest dose of possible, because quite often what I find is that when people are on a low dose of a medication, they'll be all right, but then the doctor might say, "Oh, your blood pressure still is a bit high, so we just need to double the dose a bit." So the double the dose, and that's when they get hair loss, and quite often it just going on a lower dose. So sometimes it will be that you have to stay on whatever medication it is. But sometimes, like with antidepressants, it will be just like a short-term thing, and then as soon as you feel able, you can wean off it very gradually. So it's worth having conversations with doctors about being on the lowest dose as you can. Other medications that are very commonly cause hair loss would be ones for osteoporosis. So those injections and medications. So those are very unfortunate, because often people do need to carry on with those. And it's really important also to eat healthy fats. So omega-3. So I got my omegas in. So my multivitamin includes omegas. So that's really important. So eat lots of omega-3s. And so those are my top nutrients that you need. And let me just see. I think I covered my main points that I wanted to discuss. So does anybody have any questions? Everyone's been very quiet. I don't know if everybody heard. So the question was that this lady's friend's got a patch of alopecia on the top of her head. Now, the important thing to bear in mind, I didn't cover this, so this is a good point, is when and you don't know how long she's had it for. So I would say that I did mean to say that if you do have hair loss, don't worry about it, because there are things you can do. And there's all, when I do consultations with people, I get down to the root cause of what's going on. And that's why I do blood work and take a very, very detailed history of things. And I do very, very much ask for dates of things too. So I can always get really good results with regrowing hair. However, when you've lost hair for 5 years or longer, if there's been no activity in the follicles, by that time then the follicles would have unfortunately died. But if it's been within that 5-year period, if there's been any activity, any growth or loss, then we can still work with that. So, yeah. I've only just got to know. I'm really pleased for it. Oh, really? Okay. So I'm not sure if everyone heard. So she was just saying that everybody, that she was wearing a scarf to cover it up. Now, this is the other important point, is that you don't realise how many women actually have hair loss, because women are very good at disguising it. So you can put a clip in somewhere, or you can like wear a scarf, or you can wear your hair in a different way, put your part in a different place, and no one would ever know that you've got a hair loss issue apart from you or somebody that you've like, or your hairdresser perhaps. So it's a very, very common issue, and a lot of people are. It's a little bit of a taboo subject, and that's why she's being very careful about covering it up, because people get very, very embarrassed about it. So it's such a shame, and that's why it's very difficult to be able to recommend even anything to somebody, because you don't really like. If she's mentioned it to you, then that's okay because she's mentioned it. Yeah, exactly. You wouldn't go up to a stranger and say, "Hey, I don't go to people and say, hey, I can help you." Right, yeah, exactly. Women obviously can get super conscious of when they've got a hair loss issue, and they actually stop going out and socialise. It really affects the confidence massively, so it's a really big deal. So she's talking there about a patch, so that would be like alopecia areata. There's all kinds of different types of hair loss. So you can have like a diffuse thinning, you can have excessive shedding. So the excessive shedding was like a telogen effluvium, where I mentioned before about the hair shedding cycle. So that is where something has happened that prematurely puts your follicles into a shedding phase, so that it's not completing the full 1,000 days of growing, it's falling out beforehand. Now, the good news about telogen effluvium is it is completely reversible. So you just have to identify the cause and then eliminate the cause, and then it will get better. And that's where I can step in with like finding out what's actually going on. So that's one of the most common causes of hair loss, and alopecia areata, with this lady's mentioned, that's another common one. But the one that's also equally common, more common than alopecia areata, is a female pattern hair loss, what I mentioned before, when it's just a thinning on the top, which can happen sort of menopause, like perimenopause and beyond. But that tends to be a more progressive condition, but you can still do things to help it. So, as I said, the telogen effluvium is completely reversible. The alopecia areata, if people come to me quickly, I can completely reverse that too, quite easily. But yeah, quite often people don't come to see me, obviously. So, but yeah, I love. It's very rewarding treating that. It's very rewarding. There's another form of hair loss which is quite common in women. Well, I say it's common, but it's not that common really. But it's getting more and more common. Where in ladies of menopausal age and beyond, is where they get frontal fibrosing alopecia, where their hair goes back, and it's a scarring form of alopecia. It's as I said, it's. I definitely think it's more increasing in women. Male pattern hair loss, yeah, that's interesting. Because a lot of men nowadays know what to do about. And men are quite straightforward. So when it comes to women and hair loss, it's very, very complex. And that's why I like to really delve into what's going on there, into the root cause. But when it comes to men and hair loss, it tends to be that genetic type of hair loss that was talking. But in men, it's a male pattern hair loss. But there are a lot of factors that are going on environmentally as well. So people's diets are not as good as they were, so their nutrition could be a lot poorer. And with the toxins in shampoos and things like that, and in the environment. But yeah, then they make up for it, don't they? Then they grow a big beard to compensate for not having any hair on the head. Yes. So people think that I actually see a lot of bald men in what I do, but the men that come to see me would be like young men just in the early stages of losing their hair, or more middle-aged men, but what's happening for the very first time. And so, yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if it is increasing with men, but definitely with women, because I see... because of the lives that people lead, much more stressful lives as well. Stress, I haven't mentioned that. So that's another big factor why that can cause you to lose your hair. It's stronger in the female line, yes, which is why I mentioned... Sorry?
If a boy's grandfather's bald.
Yes.
And it's his mother's colour.
Exactly. Yes, I do feel that is a stronger link. That was something that was kind of a bit of an old wives' tale, but I think it's true. I do find that does seem to be a stronger link with the maternal father. So yeah, this lady. So you had a So she's just asking if stress has a big effect. Yeah, it really does. Really can affect your hair big time. So I do a lot of counselling as part of my consultations. It's really important. I do have to talk to people about stress, what's going on in their lives. It really, really can affect you. But if you bear it in mind, when I talked about the hair cycle, the shedding cycle, so if you were, say, stressed for a week, you will get hair shedding for a week, but you won't see it for another 100 days later. And supposing you're stressed for 6 months, you'll get shedding for 6 months. And then again, if you when people come to see me, and then I help them with their rectify their stress, because sometimes they just don't know what's going on. So they know that then they're going to follow a treatment plan, and they feel instantly better. Okay, now I'm doing something. But then you still have to say, so then instantly you feel less stressed. But then you've still got to wait that 100 days before then you start to notice the benefits. So so stress is really important. So you do need to so I do recommend meditation and getting out in nature, and exercise as well. That helps. So all of those things we do have to consider. Everything comes into it. So it's very detailed. My consultations have to cover all kinds of aspects, as I said, like medication, your health and your wellness. So it's all affects you. There can be a lot of factors in that. So obviously the hormones are a big part of that, for sure, because when you're pregnant you have very high levels of estrogen, and then you've got a massive drop. Also, people can lose a lot of blood during childbirth, so some of that can be because your iron stores have gone down a lot. And then sometimes people get thyroid imbalances when they're pregnant too. So which sometimes that just rectifies itself afterwards. So the thyroid can take a part, but I think it's probably a combination mostly of probably a bit of the stress too, right? Of the hormones and the iron loss. Yeah, and then the doctors in the hospitals, they don't really give you a transfusion unless you're in really dire straits. So, yeah. But yes, it is a little bit of a guessing game, isn't it? But that's why when I do my consultation, I'll go into all kinds, and I do people's blood work as well, so I'll know what's going on internally with people. Yeah, and I ask people a lot of delving questions too. So I really do get to the root cause of what's going on. And quite often it's not just one thing. It's often multifaceted. Yes, yeah. Yes, well that will affect you more cosmetically rather than obviously internally, which we've been talking about, but it can affect the condition of your hair and make it more prone to breakage by... Perming is the worst thing, really, when it comes to... No, it is... perming, because it really does break those bonds of your hair. To be able to get the perm in, it breaks the bonds of the hair shafts. So it's literally doing damage in the process of So it can be quite damaging. So... minimise it as much as possible, really. As long as your hair's in good condition, it can tolerate it. And if you have good nutrients, then if your nutrient levels are nicely topped up, then your hair will typically be stronger, so be able to withstand a lot more than if your nutrients were a bit more depleted. Oh, did she lose it all and then it? Oh right, okay. But did she lose all her hair and then, or did it just go white on the top of?
It just went white and white, I don't know.
Oh right. It's quite rare, but it can happen. Yes, yeah. It can happen. Quite often that happens when the hair falls out, and then it, like with the alopecia areata, and then it regrows, but then it regrows white, but then in time it should repigment again. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing what shock can do, like stress can do to your body. So does anyone else have any other questions? I hope you found it interesting. Okay. So hopefully I've answered everything then. But yeah, so essentially what I was trying to really get at today was that, yeah, there are things you can do for your hair though. So by addressing your nutrients, so I have, as I said, I have my M&Os, which really are an amazing product. I have my vitamin D, my iron, my biotin and Bs, and I have my shampoos, conditioners, hair serum. I've got the L-glutamine, it's really good. I didn't mention if you've got any gut issues, so that can stop you from absorbing nutrients properly, so it's really important to get your gut into good shape. What else do we have here? Oh, we've got my collagen as well, which is really like a collagen for hair. So if anyone wants to ask me any questions afterwards, I don't want to overrun if I'm like, yeah. And that's because the follicle changes structure. So when it goes back, so the follicle would change a bit of structure. So that's why it can be a bit coarse. But yeah, that in time that should get better. Yeah, and again, like going on to my supplements, my M&Os in particular will really help, like post-chemo with the regrowth. Quite often oncologists don't like you taking supplements whilst you're going through chemo, but then afterwards when you want to really maximize the hair growth, it's a really good idea then. Yeah, so okay, so this is why when I do my consultations, I do blood tests for everybody when I do a consultation, so it's really, really important to really get down to what's going on internally. But quite often people have said to me when they're first calling up, well, I've been to the doctors and the doctors have said my blood tests are fine. So the thing is that quite often the doctors are not checking the right things in the first instance, but also they have a very, very different way of looking at your blood levels. So when the laboratory are writing up their reports, they have a reference range, which is a very, very standardised reference range, which they base on 90% of the population falling within that reference range. Can you hear me? Yeah. They base that reference range between 90% of the population need to fall within that range. And so you have to be within that 10% of the population to outside of that reference range for them to say, oh, there's something wrong with you. But bearing in mind, when they're doing blood tests, they're testing people's bloods on sick people or people that are suspected to have a low level of whatever it is in the first, or high level of whatever it is in the first instance. So it's very skewed. So it's not based on the healthy population or what is an optimal population or optimal levels. So what I'm trying to do is not to get you to be average, is like to get you to be optimal health, and that's how I get you to regrow your hair. So I have my focus really is on getting you to be as healthy and happy as possible, and then you get the hair regrowth happens as a result of everything else that's going on internally. Oh, where do I do them? I do them, well, that's a good point. I didn't say this at the beginning, but I am the original Harley Street Trichologist. But that's why I call myself, because there's a few different trichologists there now, but I was the original one. And I've been doing this for a very, very long time. But I actually have a clinic very close to here in Ascot. So that's my main place, it's in Ascot. But yeah, if you're interested in a consultation, then it'd be lovely to see people. Yeah. That's the best way. If you have an issue, then it's absolutely the best way is to have a consultation, because then there's no guesswork involved then. But if you wanted to do one thing, I said apart from washing your hair every day, it's taking my M&Os and obviously getting good quality shampoos and conditioners. And vitamin Ds are very, very important. Everyone should be taking a high dose level of vitamin D, regardless, even if you haven't had your bloods done. That's going to be a guaranteed that you'll need it.